My name is Saumya Vaishampayan, and I am a writer for the Tufts Daily. And I'm interviewing Ann Nelson, who is a journalist and a playwright, a professor at Columbia, and an author. And do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a town called Stillwater, Oklahoma. And I always had a lot of interest, first of all, in many of the arts. I love to read, but I also love music and theater and film. And I also came of age in the early 70s when National Public Radio and PBS were just starting to hit the country, and they really transformed my world. There was life after country music for the first time in the area I lived, and it was thrilling. After college, I went into journalism and worked abroad, mostly in Latin America at first, and got very interested in developing countries and the issues of conflict and how people experience them in poor countries. And I suppose I've built out from those double themes throughout my life. On the one hand, I love to take on a creative challenge, and I was somewhat liberated when I had a chance to write a play and include music a few years ago with the guys, and have it produced and have it experienced in various parts of the world. And at the same time, I always keep trying to tie my work back in one way or another to people who are living in poverty or under dictatorship and need expression, need some form of media and communications to work on the issues that are overwhelming their lives.
So like I said, you have a varied background. So how did your career begin, and how did you end up doing what you do today?
Well, my first job out of college was as a typist at the New Yorker magazine. And I am afraid to say that was in the days of typewriters and carbon paper. And after a year, I'd been debating about whether I was going to go to journalism school, music school, or law school, and I decided I'd work on paying back my loan. And the New Yorker was where I kind of got the writing bug and said, this is what I think I'm going to do. So pretty soon after that, I spent a year in the typing pool, and then I bolted. And within 2 years, I was in Latin America, and found myself to be a young war correspondent, and that was extraordinary. I had studied a lot of history, both before college and in college, and the sensation was to be on the front row watching history being made. So that was in my mid-20s, and I think I reached a sense of frustration because as a journalist, you didn't really feel you were changing anything. You saw people suffering, you recorded it, and if people didn't listen to you, nothing changed. So then I segued into work with Human Rights Watch, and I was one of the early employees at Human Rights Watch working on Latin America. And I've really woven writing and journalism and human rights work throughout my career.
So you've lived and reported from war-torn countries in Central and South America, as well as working in post-totalitarian regimes in Eastern Europe and Asia. Which of these areas sort of left the biggest impression on you?
Well, I think I'd have to say El Salvador, because I got there in 1980, a few weeks after Archbishop Romero had been assassinated, and the country was just moving into a state of war. There were very few reporters there. A lot of them had gotten death threats. And I wandered in as a 25-year-old with my camera and my tape recorder and just started recording what was around me. And I really experienced firsthand what it was like to live under a repressive regime. I would be having coffee with friends one day, and I'd wake up the next day to find out they'd been killed. And those experiences change you. I think I'd always been a gentle person by nature, but I found a kind of commitment to working against war that was very deep-seated and really has lasted my whole life.
On a last note, your talk very fittingly takes place on the United Nations International Day of Peace, which is honored by many countries across the world as an international ceasefire. This seems to be gives another interesting aspect to your talk on peace.
Yes, and I would say that the most important thing about any kind of medium, whether it's a book or a play or a website, is that it contains certain core values. It contains the perspective of the creator of the piece. And it's really important that the people who have a commitment to humanity find ways to express that and to create connections across national boundaries through new media. We've already seen that those connections can be made in a very efficient way by terrorists and arms manufacturers and all kinds of people who can use new media in very agile ways. And sometimes you have the feeling that the people who are trying to work in the direction of decency and shared humanity aren't as adept in adapting to new technology. So what I would hope to see in coming years is that they jump in and really learn the language and learn the tools and then use it in marvelous new ways.